Hello again, dear friends and truth seekers. Max here. Today we look into another hoax, chapter 6.2, the jet fuel hoax. This is it's an interesting little chapter, not too long, that will talk about something that we don't know, but we have been observing all our lives. And I came across this a couple of years ago and thought, holy crap, this is significant, if true. So if you follow me through this little story, you will understand what I mean. Let's do the usual housekeeping here. This is the Amazon page where you can find the book. Please go there, support me. We have our Rumble channel with a podcast series. Like and share, please. We got it on Brighteon, and we got it on YouTube. So please do support me. Your likes mean a lot to me. Now, I suppose that anyone reading the title of this chapter is thinking, what is Max on about? So please do follow me down a rabbit hole that is as unexpected as it is most possibly real. Not kidding. Most of us has had the pleasure or displeasure to travel in a modern airplane. I have unfortunately been on thousands of them due to my work over the years, and I've always hated it. I do not like flying, never have, never will. It just seems unnatural to me and unsafe, to be honest. If humans were supposed to fly, the Creator would have given us wings in the first place. That's how I look at it. Over the years, I've learned much regarding aviation, and I can recognize most aircrafts as I have flown in all of them. I was excited as a child at Christmas when the first A380 was launched by Singapore Airlines. I immediately booked the first flight available, and we flew from Hong Kong to Singapore on the first ever flying A380. Yeah, that's how much of a nerd I am, okay? There was only one existing plane flying at the time, and it was awesome. My wife was laughing at me as if I was a nutcase. Sorry, but once a nerd, always a nerd. These things just fascinate me and makes me who I am. I love to understand how things work. I thought I had it all figured out, until I started looking at the wings. The wings of these things during landing, from Boeing 737, A380s and Boeing 777s, 747s and A380s. I looked at them all. You see, during landing, something amazing happens if you manage to see it while sitting by the emergency exit, just over the wings. When touchdown occurs, the flaps open, and the entirety of the wing structure, the skeleton, so to speak, is exposed for all to see. What happens is this, that when you see from a good point of view, a gaping hole showing the runway below. One would say, of course, the flaps are open and it's all normal. But a nerd like me starts to ask silly questions like, if I see a gaping hole, then where are the fuel tanks? Are the wings not supposed to be filled with jet fuel? Where are they? I found some information from other nerds that actually has done some homework and there is research on this matter, and they are 100% accurate. The proof delivered is absolutely undeniable, and after you hear about this, you will never fly the same way again, I promise you. So if you look at the picture right here on the screen of a standard 737 Boeing, and please tell me where the tanks are supposed to be located exactly. I dare you. Now you see, correct, there are no tanks. And if there were any, they are surely not in the wings. And I will explain why. What I've discovered here is absolutely shocking, but also beautiful and wonderful at the same time. You will understand. If we only applied this technology and creativity to make the world better instead of using it to cheat us out of our hard-earned money, the world would be a better place. So here's what I found out so far. The famous Concorde, the most sophisticated plane ever made, you will see it here on your screen, the picture on the top. And it was the fastest too, flew from London to New York in half the time of a normal airliner. It was a supersonic flight, meaning the speed was astonishing. But how did it do it? Listen to this clip from an aviation expert and we can proceed from there. This is the first part of the puzzle.
Gas turbine engine. The gas turbine is an internal combustion engine that uses air as the working fluid. The engine extracts chemical energy from the fuel and converts its mechanical energy using the gaseous energy. So the chemical energy is the gaseous energy, or the working fluid, which is the air. Down here, a large mass of air must be supplied to the turbine in order to produce the necessary power. The mass of air is supplied by the compressor, which draws the air into the engine and squeezes it to provide high pressure air to the turbine. Now, I'm just going to read this next bit because this is the crux of it to me. Right, if the compressor and turbine were 100% efficient, the compressor would supply the air needed by the turbine. At the same time, the turbine would supply the necessary power to drive the compressor. In this case, a perpetual motion would exist. That's where it should end, because they have invented a perpetual motion free energy generator. And I just want to end it there, because then the rest of the book and the rest of I've got another book as well. It's a similar sort of price, showing you. I mean, they're absolutely fabulous, amazing pieces of engineering. But unfortunately, you get people like that don't want you to know because they're very highly paid, and it was an elitist thing to become a pilot. There was jokes, Jeff in the RAF and Tally-Ho boys and all that in the day, because the elite, I mean, they were showing you these ridiculous things. But it's the engine itself is the marvel, and the weight of these things, the whole thing, it's a lie. The whole industry are lying to you because they've invented a free energy generator and hidden it in plain sight.
All right, the Concorde could fly from Los Angeles to London faster than the speed of sound. It could fly from New York City to London in under 3 hours. It was claimed that they had, where do you put that amount of jet fuel on that, guys? I believe that they took the Concorde off the market because it was so obvious. Look at those wings. Look at the body on it. Where does the gasoline go?
So there you have it. Did you catch what he said? He mentions a perpetual motion machine would exist. What this means in nerd language, I will translate to you now. The engine sucks air into the compressor and turbine, and the speed of the air going in allows the engine to run by itself. The balance of intake of air, then compressed, makes the engine run without any additional fuel being used. Ergo, it is a free energy device. Once the airframe is cruising at stable speed, meaning cruising altitude, it runs for free. No fuel is needed, and it is self-feeding from the speed of the air it intakes. It could potentially run forever. But more information on this will follow. This is just the start. So this would bring me to the next little clip that explains how it would potentially work according to the most brilliant mind that ever graced the earth. Nikola Tesla Almighty. Let's listen to this short little one.
In 1913, one of the most influential inventors of the 20th century, Nikola Tesla, came up with this weird design for a turbine that has no blades. It's just a stack of discs. This turbine works using the stickiness of fluids. And when I say fluids, I mean anything that flows, including air. Air is not sticky, is it? Well, it actually is. Have you ever seen that trick in which you rotate a tomato using compressed air? The reason the tomato spins is because the air sticks itself to the tomato and imparts some of its movement into the tomato. Imagine you want to use this stickiness concept to make a turbine. How do you design it? A bunch of very thin discs very closely spaced to increase the surface area. And maybe you put the discs inside a cylindrical casing and inject the high-speed fluid tangentially so it naturally spirals towards the center. As the fluid flows around the casing, it transmits its speed to the turbine in the smoothest way possible, without turbulence or losses, which means this turbine can in theory reach insanely high levels of efficiency.
So, This is kind of proof of concept, although all my pilot friends tells me I'm off my rocker and absolutely crazy. And maybe I am, okay? I'm not saying that any of this is factual or true. But it does make you wonder though, doesn't it? So now, having said this, you would say, okay, but what does this have to do with the jet fuel hoax? Well, I'm glad you asked. Let's take a look at the wings of this thing. They are razor thin, as you can see on your screen. This is the beautiful Concorde they took away from us. Now, where is the space for all that fuel? And considering the specs of the plane, this monster was drinking like 5 planes combined to reach those speeds. Yet, the wings are so thin. Look at it from this perspective. It is absolutely impossible. 119,500 liters. Sorry, numbers are hard for me. Liters of fuel was supposed to go in there according to the manufacturer's specs. And it consumed 25,000 liters an hour. Just look at this thing. Okay? Now, let me show you this little screen grab I found as well, which is really fascinating because it gives you a visual representation. So here it says, Concorde fuel capacity 31,500 gallons. The tank in the picture is 30,000 gallons. Tank is 50 feet long. Tank is 10 feet in diameter. Virtually the same size as a Concorde body. Concorde holding 31,500 gallons is an obvious lie. Why? Hiding their utilization of free atmospheric energy. The gas money they are stealing from you is just a bonus. Now, this marvel of technology was taken away from us in 2003 when one of them crashed at de Gaulle Airport in France. I read from Wikipedia. On 25 of July 2000, Air France flight 4590 crashed shortly after takeoff with all 109 occupants and 4 on the ground killed. This was the only fatal incident involving Concorde. Commercial service was suspended until November 2001. The surviving aircraft were retired in 2003, 27 years after commercial operations had begun. But 2 of the 20 aircraft built have been preserved and are on display across Europe and North America. So these are now museum pieces. We will never see them fly again. My contention is that it was sabotaged and taken off service because people were starting to ask too many questions. It was just too obvious. Now let's look at other planes, such as one of my absolute favorites in the world. The real queen of the skies, the Russian Antonov 225. Look at this beast. Now this particular airplane, unfortunately, was bombed on the first days of the Ukraine war, because the plane is Ukrainian. It was built in Ukraine back in the time of the Soviet Union. I actually have seen this plane fly, and it's absolutely massive. It's the biggest thing that has ever flown in this realm, with 3 engines on each side. It's absolutely massive. So basically, what it says here on the screen, according to the specifications of the Antonov 225, the world's largest plane, has a capacity for 300 tons of fuel. That means 150 tons in each wing, the equivalent of 25 adult elephants in each wing. And that is bullshit. Research jet fuel hoax. So you see, I'm not the only crazy guy out there talking about this, okay? I'll give you another example here on the screen. Daily thought. A Boeing 747 carries between 48,400 and 57,285 gallons of fuel. That sounds like a lot. Let's go and see if we can visualize this. A 30,000 gallon steel tank looks like this on the picture on the screen. It's 15.1 feet in height and 27.1 feet in diameter. Amazing how they managed to squeeze almost double that into the wings of a 747. It is a remarkable find, isn't it? So I leave you with a detailed explanation of how this really works. It is actually absolutely fantastic that we are using what we're using to propel these marvelous machines, and we don't even know it. Now, the speaker in this video that I will show you now mentions the ether, and that is essential. And it is a gateway to our next chapter, where this element will be very prevalent. The biggest secret they have hidden from us thus far. God damn them for this. So I will leave you with this clip. It's about 24 minutes long, so it will conclude the video. And you will understand exactly what I'm talking about. This guy explains it so much better than I ever possibly could. Okay? So as I let this video play, I give my goodbyes, and I'll see you in Chapter 7, The Lost and Forgotten Civilization of Tartaria. This is one of my absolute favorite subjects, and I'm sure you will enjoy just as much as me. So that's all for me today. Max out, and peace to you all. Here comes the video.
Greetings, fellow air travellers. This video is for everyone who has ever bought an airline ticket. I'm going to make this video as short as possible, but the large amount of information included will inevitably dictate the length, so please bear with me. Hopefully at the end of this video I will have convinced you that there is a deception going on right in front of your eyes. This affects every person that has ever travelled on a modern-day airliner. If you're not convinced, then I hope that this information will have planted a little seed of thought that you can use later on when something else related comes to light. We have been told that the fuel for a flight consists of about 50% of the ticket price. We have accepted this information for many, many years. What if that information was wrong? What if the manufacturers knew this and chose to keep it quiet? We've all experienced walking up the airplane steps, stopping in the queue and looking around. We look at the wings, we look at the engines, and marvel at the size of these amazingly powerful pieces of modern technology. Sometimes we also see the fuel being pumped into the wings. We think nothing of it. But what happens if we put our common sense hat on and take another look? The Airbus A380 is a truly amazing feat of engineering. In a purely bums-on-seats configuration, this aircraft can take almost 900 passengers. A typical coach takes about 50 passengers, so the A380 can take approximately 18 coachloads of people. That's a lot of people. According to their own specifications, the A380 can take 323,525 litres of jet fuel in the wing tanks. That works out at roughly 260 metric tons, or 130 tons of fuel in each wing. I'll let that sink in for a minute because that is very, very heavy. That is the same as 16 red London double-decker buses on each wing. Or to put it another way, a herd of 22 fully grown elephants on each wing. How does that sound to you? Pretty incredible, right? But you can look this information up in the specifications and check it for yourself. Most of us have seen a plane refueling. They connect one or two hoses underneath the wing, connect that to a pump on board a refueling truck, which then pumps the fuel from underground tanks. This takes about 45 minutes for a full load. We never see the amount being pumped because the tanks are not visible. Let's make them visible and see how that looks. It would take 16 of these 20,000 litre trucks to fill the A380. Where does all this fuel go? In the wings, you say? Okay, let's take a look at the wings, and you tell me where you think it all goes. This is the A380 wing. Pretty huge. Let's put a fuel truck next to it. And another. And another. And another. And 4 more. Just for this wing. Another 8 go into the other wing. Can you see what I'm saying? Now let's take a look at the wings on these aircraft. This is the new Dreamliner taking off in a spectacular fashion. Observe the thickness of the wings. How many fuel trucks would fit in those wings? Okay, let's take a look at the fill rate. To fully fill the A380 takes approximately 45 minutes. To fill an Olympic-sized swimming pool takes about 4 days.
I think people are going to be really excited.
That is 2.5 million litres of water. The capacity of the A380 is about 8% of the volume. 8% of 96 hours is 7.6 hours. That's a lot longer than 45 minutes. So maybe the filling equipment is much faster for a plane. Let's take a look. This is filling a swimming pool. And this is filling an aircraft. To fill the tanks of an A380 in 45 minutes, you would have to have a pump and a hose that could pump 7,189 litres of fuel per minute. Let's look at something that pumps at about half that speed. Now the plane, now the fire hose. Don't you think that filling that wing with that sort of pressure would just rip a hole right through the top? It's only made of aluminium. So far, we have no room for all of that fuel. An incredible weight of fuel and a filling procedure that makes no sense whatsoever. Time to take a look at moving around with large bodies of liquid. The size of a large car's petrol tank is about 70 litres. Don't you sometimes wish that your petrol tank was bigger so you wouldn't have to fill up so often? There are reasons why this is so. Number 1, the weight would drastically reduce the performance of the car. And number 2, the amount of fuel sloshing about in the tank would seriously interfere with the road holding whilst going around corners. This doesn't seem to be the case with aircraft using vast quantities of fuel. Let's take a look at what large bodies of liquid does to road holding. Not a pretty sight. Now let's look at a couple of landings of aircraft and try to imagine hundreds of tons of fuel sloshing about in the wings. I think you might be getting the gist of what I'm trying to say. It is ridiculous to think that these aircraft take off, fly, bank, maneuver and land with large amounts of liquid moving in all directions. The next video clip is from the US Air Force, showing the filling and strapping down of the large bladder tanks used for in-flight refueling of their aircraft. Bear in mind that these 3 tanks are only 9,000 US gallons. This is just under 10% of the fuel needed to fill the A380. Look at the lengths these guys go to and the amount of straps needed to stop this lot sloshing around. Also, this 9,000 gallons takes up a good portion of the aircraft's cargo bay. Where on earth would you fit 10 times this amount on an A380? Is it making sense to you yet? Let's move on to the workings of a modern fan turbine jet engine. Rather than explaining this myself, I will let this short video do the work for me. Observe that at the end they actually say that the secondary flow, which is only compressed air, is the major contributor. Now let's watch how compressed air, ejected at force into ordinary air, reacts. This is an experiment that anyone can do at home. You compress air inside a plastic bottle, pop open the top, and see the result: water vapor. This is what is happening when the jet engines are in cruise mode. They are running purely on compressed air, and the contrails are water vapor being ejected out from the engines. While small amounts of fuel are needed to get the jet engine up to speed, when in cruise mode the engines use very little to no fuel whatsoever. We are being charged huge amounts for fuel that doesn't exist. It's not needed to fly these amazing machines. All that's needed is the most abundant thing that we've been given: air. I will end this video here with a clip of the A380 at an airshow doing a slow pass. It looks as though it is levitating at one point, but that is the subject of the next video, which involves our little friends, the bumblebees.
Very, very slow speed. It's an awesome sight. And I don't like the word awesome, but it's true in this case. Look at that. It is almost unbelievable. This, of course, is using the flight safety fly-by-wire programs that the Airbus things have installed. Overall length 73 meters. Wingspan with a max risk of short.
In part 1, we looked at the ridiculous amounts of fuel supposedly being pumped into these aircraft, and the possibility that the technology being used is way beyond the level they are telling us. To those who obviously misunderstood part 1, I need to clarify. The airlines claim that fuel constitutes 50% of our ticket cost. I'm not saying that fuel is not being used. What I'm saying is that it's a fraction of what we're being charged for and a minor part of flight technology.
Come on guys, don't hang around. We alone are responsible for 90% of the thrust.
As stated in part 1, we have the engine manufacturers themselves saying that 90% of the thrust comes from the compressed bypass air and not from the combustion chamber. That's not me saying that. It's the people who design and make these jet engines. So it must be true, right? Yes and no. Let's get into it. To make sense of all this, we have to embrace the idea of the ether. The ether was a totally accepted element in the past. Before Einstein and his wife concocted the widely acclaimed relativity theories, everyone, including all of the scientists, knew the existence of the ether. In one fell swoop, Einstein got rid of the ether and everybody else followed suit. The age-old technologies used in the design of these aircraft and engines also utilize the properties of the ether. That's the bit they're not telling us. To do so would fly in the face of contemporary scientific thinking, and they would be forced to recognize the existence of this hugely important element. I said at the end of part 1 that I would be mentioning our little friends the bumblebees. Well, to do that, I first have to bring you up to speed with Victor and Victor. If you visit Victor Schauberger's Ripley's Believe It or Not page, you will find it sadly lacking in important information. This man was a master at decoding the secrets of nature, a prolific writer and far ahead of his time, yet the mainstream scientists chose to ignore his work and label him a nutcase. Just this fact should throw up a plethora of red flags with people. This man dedicated his whole life to the study of nature, and he came up with some truly fascinating stuff. Levitation, propulsion through the ether, and implosion technology, to name just a few. Let's start with implosion technology to show you that he wasn't just making this stuff up. As you will see in this clip, the gas that she's holding would normally be enough to blow a gaping great hole in her hand, but it doesn't. That's because it implodes rather than explodes. The force goes inwards rather than outwards. Implosion technology.
In 3, 2, 1. Okay?
You could judge by the loudness of the implosion that there was a great deal of energy created. Enough to seriously injure her, but apart from being slightly shaken up, she seems fine. Victor's main body of work was with water, but he postulated and demonstrated that this technology works just as well in other mediums, one of them being air, or the ether. Air is our medium, water is for the fish, but the two are intrinsically locked together because both mediums behave the same way when coerced. I highly recommend watching the links for Victor's work in the show notes. These patterns and properties are used throughout nature in the environment, in trees and shrubs, in flowers, and in animals. Basically, the whole of nature conforms to these rules, and Victor figured it out. As I showed earlier, Victor confirms that using the vortex idea on an aircraft, it will literally suck its way through the ether rather than thrusting against the air molecules.
Schauberger's central approach here was the principle of matter transformation. The elements of the air, particulate matter and gases are converted in this repulsator. One part escapes through the ring rotator, and the radiation energy, Schauberger talks about synthesis electricity, is emitted through the central axis. The repulsion creates a biological vacuum along the axis in front of it, into which the aeroplane is sucked.
The relatively small amount of fuel on board is used for takeoff, landing and taxiing. It's also used for the APU. The APU is the auxiliary power unit that's situated at the back end of most commercial aircraft. This is a small jet engine configured as a compressed air generator to feed the main engines at startup and during cruise mode, amongst other functions. I must just add something that I didn't address in part 1. Military aircraft like fighter jets use a lot more fuel than commercial aircraft. They need the extra power and thrust that combustible fuel gives. In cruise mode, a commercial airliner does not need the extra power as its forward motion is sufficient to suck enough air into the engine. Just a little observation here. The engines are designed to sit forward of the wings on pylons. From an engineering standpoint, it would be much easier to place them directly under the wings. As most people think, the jet engine spews out masses of superheated exhaust gas. If this was the case, then why would they put the exhaust directly under the wing where all the supposed fuel is stored? Next time you look at an aircraft, try and find the scorch marks under the wings from all of the super hot gases. You won't find any. The small amount of hot gas being ejected from the combustion chamber is surrounded by cooler, compressed air. Don't you think that these people should be in hospital with nasty burns from the super hot gases? Before we leave Victor number 1, let's look at his vortex principles at work in real time. If you think his principles are just theories, then feast your eyes on this. Like the jet engine, the Garuda-San Giovanni route needs a small force to start it, but then impels itself infinitely using the medium around it. In this case, water. Despite the downward force of this water, the route impels itself even vertically, just as the jet engine does through the medium of ether. There is much more to talk about with Victor Schauberger's vortex principles and how the aircraft manufacturers utilize the natural forces of nature to assist flight, but I don't want this video to be too long. Again, check out Victor's work for yourselves and you'll see the connections. Time for Victor number 2. Viktor Grebennikov is lesser known than Schauberger, but his research and experimentation is just as extensive and important. It also derives its reasoning from nature.
It's a man named Grebennikov from Russia. Grebennikov was kind of a non-conventional scientist. He was an entomologist, did a lot of work with bugs, entomology. And his favorite thing was to go out into the steppes of Russia and into the various outer hinterlands and camp out in the summers and study his favorite subject.
This might look like a radio-controlled bee, but it's actually a bee with a little radar transponder on it, which means that we can track this bee as it flies around the field.
And these little guys can carry 90% of their body weight in pollen, so it won't affect the way it flies.
First of all, the bees are flying much faster than predicted, an incredible 30 miles an hour, even when fully laden. The next surprise is where the bees go. They almost always overfly potentially decent food. And once they've found their patch, they then repeatedly shuttle to and from it. And this is the really clever bit. In spite of 30-mile-an-hour crosswinds, whether out or back, they all fly in dead straight lines.
A bumblebee can't fly aerodynamically. Yeah, and he's right. And I said, well, what did bumblebees do? And they said, well, they levitate. And I said, well, how's that? And he says, come on, I'll show you. And he showed me, he wrote a book, incidentally. I don't know if it's still in print. It's in the Library of Congress. The book is called Tomorrow's Energy Need Not Be Fuel. And in that book, he gave reference to what I'm talking about, that that of levitation, that the bumblebee, when he starts to beat his wings, when he starts to flap his wings, there's a little cavity, a hollow cavity next to the larynx inside his system that's hollow. And when he beats his wings, he starts to resonate this energy, and it goes back and forth, just similar to a guitar strumming on one side of the room and hitting the same chord on the other side of the room, or somebody hitting a high C and breaking a crystal. It's the same thing, it's resonance. And he said, what they do, they resonate. And when they resonate, they eventually reach the resonance of the field around them. And he explained it this way to me, that the Earth was, of course, spinning, but it was operating on a frequency of 8.5 hertz per second or so forth. And he says, once this bumblebee hits that resonant frequency of its surroundings, it becomes a free agent. It creates a magnetic bubble around itself, and it can go anywhere it wants. And I said, well, that's not in any of the science books. He said, I know. You probably never see it there either, but that's what happens. They'll discover it someday and bring it out, but it's just we have a conventional way of doing things, and then we have a natural way of doing things, and they're totally different. They're diametrically opposed.
The important point here is the bees. As you've heard, the bumblebee shouldn't really be able to fly. Those wings are way too small to lift that chubby little body off the ground. In fact, it's a bit of a conundrum also for the mainstream scientists. They can travel in perfectly straight lines for long distances without any deviation, even during a howling crosswind. Because of the resonant frequencies produced by the vibration of their wings, they create a bubble in the ether, protecting them from any outside interference. So levitation by sound waves is a real-world effect. Do you want more proof?
That the bug wings themselves were creating an anti-gravity phenomena under certain conditions.
These technologies are known and used in modern-day aircraft manufacture. The vortexes being produced are helping the lift properties of the aircraft. This is why the engines are forward of the wings. If they were underneath the wings, then the vortex wouldn't do its job. It has to flow over and not under the wing. Next time you fly, try to listen to the hum of the engines. It changes pitch when going into and out of cruise mode. Just pure speculation here, but there are large cavities in the wings, which are tested with compressed air and not liquids, by the way, and the engines produce a distinct hum, just like the bees do. So the tale of two victors comes to an end. I highly recommend watching all the video links in the description box, as you will gain a much better understanding of the natural forces at work here. As always, this is just my own musings, and they are by no means definitive, but the scientific evidence and the observable effects definitely backs up the theory. Two highly intelligent gentlemen, that have had their research largely ignored by the mainstream scientific community. But the manufacturers are covertly using the technology to fly their planes. As per usual, it's us, the consumer, who's losing out, while these huge companies are reaping the financial benefits. In part 3, we will look closer at the fuel tank explosion suppression techniques using the inert gas nitrogen. Nitrogen doesn't burn, but the question is, how fast does it expand when vaporized? Stay tuned and see you in part 3. Thank you for watching.